It's right there. It's coming. Get everybody in the coolers. A tornado coming into Dawson Springs right now. Yep, there it is. Oh no, this guy's driving right into it. A large rain-wrapped tornado just crossed I-69 north in between Morton's Gap and Arlington.
In December 2021, the small town of Mayfield, Kentucky was shaken to its core by an EF4 tornado that tracked across 4 states: Arkansas, Missouri, Tennessee, and Kentucky. I'm Corey Dierdorf, and we're going to take you on a journey of the horrifying sights and sounds that happened that night, along with the first-hand accounts of storm victims, first responders, and others across this impacted region for the last 2 years. People that were all shaken to their core after the unthinkable happened, and it's something that could happen to you without any warning at all. Once the twister crossed over the state line from Tennessee into Kentucky, it went from being an already rare, long-tracking tornado to an unimaginable, colossal monster with a mile-wide path. This twister ripping through the hearts and towns, communities alike, with winds just shy of 200 miles per hour. It came through the heart of Mayfield, Kentucky, without any mercy. Where I'm standing was once Mayfield's bustling downtown filled with local businesses, now just open areas of grass, devastation, and a memorial with the name of those lost. The cyclone stayed on the ground for hours, people's homes, belonging, livelihoods all torn apart. Pieces of their lives tossed 30,000 feet in the air. That's where the commercial airliners fly. Unimaginable destruction in the path for over 165 miles. And it was in the darkest hours after this horrific event that we found something incredible. The unbreakable spirit of the people in the path of this storm, the strengths and bonds of community that were forged in the face of the unimaginable. Join us on this journey as we show you what life has really been like the last 2 years after that horrible night.
We've always known that there was going to be something happen here in Western Kentucky because of the New Madrid Fault. But we didn't think that, we thought that would be the disaster, not tornadoes. We've had small floods here to some degree, but nothing of the magnitude of these tornadoes.
Studies from the Storm Prediction Center and other climatologists and scientists, meteorologists have shown that our region is experiencing an uptick in tornado activity over the last 10 to 20 years. We are, as some would say, the new Tornado Alley.
Our lives changed dramatically on that day, on December the 10th. You know, leaving work that day, we knew there was storms that were coming. None of us could imagine what was going to happen, because you always think it's not going to happen to us. You know, we knew that there were going to be thunderstorms, rain, wind, those type of things, but we didn't think it was going to be devastating like it turned out to be.
I don't live very far from where the tornado came into Mayfield, through like the Pritchett Cardinal Road area and across the interstate, and hit the candle factory. So that was the first thing that I saw the next morning after the tornado, was the devastation at Pritchard and Cardinal.
What did that, like, what was your, do you remember what you thought when you first saw it?
I didn't know anybody that lived there, but I knew people died.
That's horrible.
Less than 1 hour after the tornado hit Mayfield, it made its way here to a community set along the banks of the nearly 180-mile-long Kentucky Lake known as Cambridge Shores. The damage was so intense it took months to get the massive amount of debris out of the deep water so the rebuilding of homes and recovery could begin.
When I pulled into this, I was speechless, and I've never been so speechless, but it felt like almost sacrilegious to talk. It was like overwhelming, the amount of devastation. And it just it's hard to explain to people, and even on the video it just doesn't capture it. But and then that was on land, pulling into Cambridge Shores in this area, getting to the lake. When we got out on the lake, that was just kind of like, it was 5 miles of every kind of debris you could imagine. And so we, with the help of a lot of people, we got all of our equipment out of Memphis. We brought it up here, got here Christmas Day. And the first thing we did is we just started going for all the cars that the tornado threw in the lake, all the boats, and just started stacking them and just got right to work. And we started with the large stuff and then worked our way down to the little bit smaller stuff, then a little bit smaller stuff.
It was right here during the cleanup efforts that we met Miss Pam, a 78-year-old woman with an ailing husband. They both survived the storm in their small A-frame home while on the phone with their daughter as the tornado ripped through this community straight towards them.
I had been in earthquakes in California as a young woman. Nothing as destructive as this. I had never been in a tornado. I had never been in a hurricane. I'd been in bad storms, but nothing as quick and as sudden and as destructive.
As a meteorologist, definitely the worst night that I've ever had to experience and forecast and warn for. It was awful. What we were seeing on radar was something that you might expect to see maybe in Oklahoma or Kansas. It wasn't something that we typically see in Western Kentucky or Northwest Tennessee in our local area. We just don't see supercells like that. But there it was, and it wasn't letting up. It just kept going and going.
I was impacted by the tornado on December the 10th. And even though 10 of my neighbors lost everything, I was fortunate enough not to have my house just come down around me, but there was damage to the house and to the yard, and four giant cedar trees were on my house. And only by the blessing of dear God, we were able to get through it. But it's been an extremely hard experience, emotionally, physically, every way.
Meteorologists had been monitoring the storm for over a week. Multiple tornadoes had already ripped through that region Monday, but nothing could have prepared them for what unfolded in the early hours of December 10th, 2021.
I remember on Wednesday, we started becoming increasingly concerned. We were seeing numbers being spit out by the models, the computer models that were used for weather forecasting, that were showing very high. They were pegging out towards the top of what you would expect, even in the springtime, let alone in December. The jet stream was going to be strong, very warm, moist air. The Gulf of Mexico had been warmer than average leading up to this event. And that's a red flag for us as well, because that usually means increasing moisture, higher dew points, a more volatile atmosphere. We had questions on that Thursday and Friday, and the Storm Prediction Center started ramping up the wording. Weather Service ramping up the warning, ramping up the rhetoric about this event. We were all ramping up the rhetoric about this event. We were concerned. We knew there would likely be tornadoes. The supercell thunderstorms are the ones that typically produce the bigger hail, the longer track tornadoes, 70, 80 mile per hour wind gusts. All of that was on the table, but we still weren't quite sure how it would unfold. We expected the most severe weather to be late in the afternoon into the overnight hours, which made it a dangerous setup. overnight tornadoes in our region typically are the deadly ones. Most of our tornado deaths are at night. Most of our tornado deaths are in the autumn and winter. So as meteorologists, we knew this going into the event. We were very concerned. We are using strong wording or strong rhetoric. Long-track tornadoes are possible. We were expecting damage from this system. So we were trying to do everything we could to get the public's attention. And I think we did get the public's attention because the response on social media and elsewhere was sort of overwhelming. People were highly tuned in to this event. So as meteorologists, we expected it to be a bad day. Nobody knew just how bad, but we did expect it to be bad.
You could tell that this was different just from the meteorologist on TV. Like, it was obvious that something could happen. And then we started hearing reports of a very large tornado that had been on the ground for a long time, and its projected path was through Hopkins County.
We had a heads up, kind of, that we were going to have some bad weather. But didn't think anything like this, okay? And my daughter had called me on the phone and said, "Mama, this looks bad, this looks bad. Is it there?" I said, "It's here." And I could hear, it was like a train, like everybody says, this roar and this immense energy, negative energy that you could feel and hear. And I could hear her saying, "God save my mama, God save my mama, God save my mama." And with that encouragement, I went upstairs and was able to talk my husband into coming downstairs. And just as we got at the top of the stairs, I took a step, reached out, had him, trying to secure him. The lights were gone, and I fell down the stairs. And by the time I got up, he got down, we knew, God help us, and God help everybody in our vicinity, because you couldn't see out the debris. You couldn't see out the windows. You couldn't open the doors. One door had been blown off. And I had those giant cedar trees, and you could hear them pound, pound, pound. And I thought, this can't be Oz. We're not in Oz, I know, but oh my gosh, what are we in? And we were, "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm okay." And we tried to open the doors, tried to look out, and it's still afraid. Terrorized. To stay, terrorized, and knowing you can't go, knowing that you can't leave, and hoping and praying to God that it's over with, and feeling completely helpless.
I started that night out after work, and as soon as I got off work, we raced down to Parkway to get on the first tornado of the night, which was coming straight into McLean County, Central City, Greenville area. I saw it cross the road on I-69 and come into Central City just around the Walmart area.
A large rain-wrapped tornado just crossed I-69 north in between Morton's Gap and Arlington.
And I remember that night I told Alan Miller, he was the mayor of Bremen, I said that one's over. I said, but this one coming is serious business. So I told him, I said, I'm gonna go down to Princeton, and if I call you again or if I text you, it's not to talk about anything else but this tornado. And so when I got down to Princeton, that was the first time I saw it, just southwest of Princeton, called it into the National Weather Service, and I didn't even know it at the time. National Weather Service Paducah was down, and I was talking to somebody in Springfield, Missouri. So when I left Princeton, I raced as fast as I could to Dawson Springs to get in this hilltop position so I could see it come into Dawson Springs, and the way it looked on radar, it was doing 60 miles an hour. I had about maybe 10 minutes to get there. So raced into Dawson Springs at the gas station right there at the exit. Unbeknownst to me, the tornado intensified, and as it should have hit the gas station, it right turned and went right through the center of Dawson Springs. So now I'm like driving right next to it. And I barely made it out of there. I think the way that we saw it, it was maybe 10 seconds tops. I was in front of the tornado and it crossed right back behind me. And as the night unfolded, I lost internet. I didn't have any radar. Live stream went down. All the cell phone service was down. And caught it again crossing at Morton's Gap. And as it came into view, it was totally wrapped in rain, but you could clearly see it in the middle of the night. The lights at the exit shut down, and here comes a semi-truck driving, and I'm thinking to myself, what is this guy doing? And he drove right into it. After it crossed the road, I couldn't believe I was able to get a text out to a friend of mine, Mayor Bremen, Alan Miller. I said, bro, you got 9 minutes, huge wedge on the ground, 9 minutes. And I never heard back from him the rest of the night until about 3 o'clock in the morning. He said, pray for Bremen, it's gone. And that just really sank in.
No one could have anticipated the scale of devastation that awaited them at dawn.
My mom actually said, she called me the next day, she says it looked like it snowed here with all the insulation and just debris and photos. And so it's pretty amazing how many people were actually impacted by it.
We didn't know what towns it was going to hit through West Kentucky, but we knew it was coming toward us. And for me personally, I did go to the basement immediately that night. And the tornado traveled through where we are now, Dawson Springs, and headed toward Madisonville. My house is about 2 miles from the line, and picked up enough debris to fill up a couple wheelbarrows full in my yard the next morning. So just missed us, but it definitely got our attention. I mean, we could hear debris hitting the house as the tornado came through.
The devastation on that street out in the county was pretty bad. ATF was there the next day when we were out there looking for the personal effects for a lady that had died. And you just don't think about like the dead animals. Because everything's destroyed.
You know, as meteorologists, we typically have a little more knowledge of what's going on than everyone else. And then we're giving you that information. When we were watching radar, it was disheartening. We were watching this tornado move into the Missouri Boot Hill, not letting up in intensity, pegging out the numbers, looking violent on radar. We saw a debris ball with debris in the Boot Hill going above 10, 15,000 feet. We knew this is the real deal. This is bad. Of course, experience around here with tornadoes and supercells is the tornadoes don't last that long. Typically a tornado lasts 5 or 10 minutes, sometimes a little more. The longer tracked ones around here can be on the ground 20, 30 minutes. That's a lot. This one just kept going. As it entered northwest Tennessee, we saw it try to cycle, what we call cycling. And the supercell kind of lost a little bit of its intensity as far as the rotation on radar. We weren't sure as the storm entered northwest Tennessee if it was still producing a tornado. It looked like it probably was, but it was a little weaker than it was in the Boot Hill. So we gave a little bit of a sigh of relief. Okay, maybe this is going to cycle and finally lift, because it had already been on the ground, obviously based on radar, for a long time. It was already a long track tornado. But as soon as it crossed over into Kentucky, it almost instantly became what we call a wedge tornado. It just dropped down, was a mile, half mile, mile wide, and was back on the ground. So we felt a little bit of relief in northwest Tennessee when we thought maybe it's cycling, maybe it's weakening. But it didn't. It just rapidly re-intensified and tore through Casey, Kentucky. We could see on radar at this point that debris was above 20,000 feet. As it neared Mayfield, 30,000 feet. That's airline level. We knew this is a violent tornado. EF4, EF5, didn't matter. It was a violent tornado. As we watched it near Mayfield, we could see that debris ball clearly on radar. Like, there was no discussion that isn't this. We knew. Sometimes we don't know if a tornado's on the ground. We could see the rotation. We're not sure if it's on the ground. We don't always see the debris. There was no question about this beast. It was on the ground and it was large. As it tore through Mayfield, I think that every meteorologist in the area just kind of held their breath. We were experiencing the same emotions as everyone else. It was traumatic. We knew that likely people were dying. We knew that structures were being destroyed. And we were seeing debris at 30,000 feet. Those are people's homes, businesses. Those are trees. We knew this is a violent tornado.
I think it started initially down in Princeton. And as I'm racing to get back to Dawson Springs, and once I actually got a real good look at the size and the scope of that wedge, it looked like the whole cloud base was on the ground. And I remember pulling out of Dawson Springs and fleeing. And in the back of my mind, my mind is telling me there are people dying right now. And that is just one thing that'll just never leave your brain space, so to speak, is that instance when I left and going down the exit and I could see the lights at the exit just shut down. I'm like, there are people dying here. And when I called into the news station, I talked to some producer. They had people answering the phones. And I was like, you got to get the word out. There are people dying right now. This thing is massive, huge, mile-wide wedge. And I spoke in those terms just to try and tell them how serious this situation was that was unfolding.
As the storm bore down, residents found themselves cut off. No internet, no phone lines, no TV, and no power, leaving them in a state of desperation, wondering if the rare, long-lasting tornado would strike their homes and businesses.
And fortunately, it missed where we were and my house both by less than a mile. But then again, I had to leave the basement, drive back to my house to check and see if it hit our home, and it hadn't. So then I drove down the road about another half a mile, and a storage building where they stored like RVs and boats was completely blown into the center of the road, and it was just metal and trees stacked up as high as the telephone poles in the middle of the road, and I couldn't see any further from that. I didn't realize until the following day that when I drove up to that building that was in the middle of the road, for the next mile after that, there was absolutely nothing left. It wiped out at least 15 homes. Several of them, they never found any piece of the home.
I went to Barnsley first. When I saw the train derailed in Barnsley, loaded train cars laying on their sides, that's when you really know how bad it is. Then you look over and you see a whole little neighborhood completely gone. So left there, then made my way to Dawson. It took me probably, I'd say, 45 minutes to go 10 miles, getting through trees and stuff like that, working with fire departments, opening roads up to get to this side of the county.
The lightning was intense. I've never seen lightning like that at all. The surprising part was being that close to it. I've been in a lot of pretty strong winds, but when your windshield wipers get pinned and you got your wheel at 3 o'clock and you're still going straight and the pedal mashed to the floor and the car won't move, that's another one of those intuitive moments where I'm in a terrible situation. But I come out and yeah.
They say it was 30 seconds, but the emotional and mental torture that we went through the rest of that night was incredible. It was incredible. The first thing I remember was I was able to get out the door, but you couldn't see the deck for these trees. You couldn't, and you knew there were trees everywhere, on the road, on the driveway. You were trapped, and you were hoping and praying it was over with, because how much more could this little house go through, right? And my neighbor, we saw a man shine a light over at us and say, "Are you okay?" and then over to her, "Are you okay?" And then she and I would say, "Praise God, we're okay." And I heard her say, "But down at the end of Marshall Circle, it's incredibly devastating, and there's people hurt down there." And those were people that I loved, people that had been my neighbors for 15 years, that I was extremely close to. And then later that night, my husband kept trying to go outside, and I would, because I maybe thought maybe all the trees weren't down. You know what I mean? You'd have a tree come down on you, and you could barely hear people saying, "Help me, help me." And it was almost a nightmare. You didn't, is this surreal? Am I really living this? And what is it going to be like tomorrow? And what horrible news am I going to have to deal with tomorrow? Not just for Marshall County, Marshall Circle, but the entire aspect of Western Kentucky, a place that I love so much. And it's still with me, honey. It's still, it'll never leave me. It worries me about the little children that went through it. I don't have, I'm at the end of the road and they're just beginning down the road, you know? How long will it haunt them?
Some of the messages I sent out were the strongest messages I've ever had to send out. You know, get underground, get your shoes on, get helmets, get your keys to your car. You know, I was sending my family out of the path to get away from it. It was hard. It was hard that night, forecasting it. It's just the emotions, and they're still raw. You know, of calling your family saying, "You need to get in your car right now and go north. You need to get in your car and go south." Or being on the phone with family as it went through Benton.
Never a tornado on the ground that long. I mean, there's been some, especially in March and April. Myself and a couple other guys chased Dixie Alley, which is Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, Georgia, Louisiana, Arkansas. Yeah, when it's March and there's tornado threatened Dixie, you go. And those tornadoes, just like here, I mean, they're just, they're a different animal. They move very quick. One of them would be like the Holly Springs, Mississippi tornado. That was a big tornado. It was on the ground 70 miles, 80 miles, but nothing like this. I mean, we all at the beginning of the next day on Saturday thought this one had rivaled the great tri-state tornado.
The Kentucky part of it, a little bit of Tennessee, Kentucky part of it is 165 miles, I believe. If you would connect the two, it would have been over 200 miles. The only thing I could compare to would be the 1925 tri-state tornado, which my grandparents told me about. They went through Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana, hit Murfreesboro. Some of those towns never recovered. They say that it stunted their growth so much that they never fully recovered, even to this day.
They lost everything. Everything tangible that they had was gone. Clothing, cars, toys. A little 6-year-old boy down, all his toys completely destroyed. Not even a toy to play with at 6 years old. And I don't know if it's because of my advanced age, or what has happened to the entire part of Western Kentucky that was impacted by all of this. This has been an extremely difficult thing on me emotionally, physically, and financially. And it's probably one of the lowest times of my life.
You know, the crews that did a lot of the demo, that would take another 4 or 5 months to clean up. You know, their trucks were muddy and they were muddy, and it was, you know, it was quite, we had a lot of, you know, just yard cleanup after the debris was picked up, just to straighten up yards and fix culverts and streets. And, you know, the street signs were gone, the house numbers were gone, the trees were gone, and the sidewalks were tore up, and we're still working to get some of that back.
When I went to Mayfield in the days after the tornado, and I came over the hill coming from Paducah going south to Mayfield, and you come over that hill where the bridge is, I felt lost. Like, for one, when you entered the damage zone, you didn't know where you were. what street you were on. The landmarks were gone. It was just total destruction in some areas. But that first initial feeling was awe. There was a sense of awe at the nature, the power of nature, that it could do this in a matter of seconds. It could just destroy anything it wanted. The other was, sadness, a very deep sadness.
Almost disbelief.
Disbelief, sadness, just trying to comprehend what everyone in this community was going through, and I knew what they were about to go through from past disasters that I've worked in, Hurricane Katrina and Hurricane Rita and other tornadoes. I knew that you're looking at 10, 15 years of recovery, so I'm pretty sure that I took a few deep breaths while going through Mayfield and just trying to comprehend in my head what had happened, what the recovery would look like, and what everyone was going through.
The Community Foundation found itself in uncharted territory, facing a crisis like anything in its 25-year history. With a staff of just 2, the organization had to rally quickly, delivering aid to a devastated community through an outpouring of generous donations.
All of this was driven by the donors.
I tried to make contact with Chris and said, we're going to have to do something. So I had to drive from our piece of property up on the lake about 7 miles to a little drive-in restaurant called Blues. It was up on a hilltop where I could get cell service. And I texted her, said we need to put something on our website about a tornado relief effort. Other community foundations across the country picked up on that and what was on our website. And they started putting it on their websites nationally. And within a couple of days, our mailbox was full of checks, money just, coming in, flowing in from everywhere.
I think as a community, we have to talk about it. We have to share our stories without re-traumatizing people. And we also have to talk about what works, what does, help. And that is really, the people that have lost family members. And we've had clients who lost family members in Mayfield and then in Dawson Springs. Although they're many miles apart, it's the same tornado, the same time. So I think you have to let people know what the resources are, give them that space to talk about what's happened and learn where do we put this in our life. It is part of our story. It's part of the city's story, our Western Kentucky, our family's story. And what resources can we use? What professionals can we work with? What things can I do so that whenever I have a thought, I think about it differently. So then I have a different action versus that fight or flight.
Among its many services, the Community Foundation provided critical counseling support, offering a lifeline to those grappling with the emotional aftermath.
Afterwards, we spent weeks, months helping in the recovery efforts, especially in Mayfield and some of the other areas as well, and just helping people. We had several Christmas events, which was great, brought communities together with kids giving gifts and just trying to take their minds off of what had happened, because truly everybody has PTSD that experienced this event. The people that were hit have storm trauma, storm PTSD, the weather forecasters that had to forecast it, issue the warnings, watch the radars, and the community as a whole that watched it unfold on their television sets. This was local, this was real, this wasn't 1,000 miles away in some other country or in Kansas. This was here in our backyard.
The afterwards is the horrible shock and the lack of control that that you have in your life. And then it's multifaceted because reaching out for help can be extremely demeaning to your pride and to your independence. And knowing that you need help and thinking that other people probably need it as much, if not more, with more future ahead of them, then you deal with the guilt of that.
One of the questions we we're asked, and there's not really an answer, but why bad things happen to good people. And that survivor guilt, why was one home left standing and the one next to it was completely demolished, and people were injured and then people were okay, So that gets back to your spiritual health and having faith that something bigger than you, whatever you decide to call that, is directing your path, intervening, guiding. And we don't have answers, but giving each other the permission to say, I feel bad that this didn't happen to me and it did happen to someone else. I think that as part of the human spirit, that's important to really talk about and say that that's normal.
It was a traumatic event. I think that everybody you have spoken with or do speak with will tell you the same. It was hard. It was a hard one to work that night, and it was hard in the recovery afterwards. But all you could do is just go out and try and help. Do something tangible, because that helped you heal from what happened, and that helped other people heal from what happened.
The Community Foundation recognized that true community healing required a recovery led by local citizens. To support this, they strengthened long-term recovery groups across 12 counties, empowering them to identify and address the unique unmet needs of families, coordinate volunteer efforts to repair and rebuild homes, and distribute donated goods. Together, citizen leaders from these groups worked through 14,000 cases and directed nearly $50 million in donated funds, goods, and volunteer hours to support their communities over the following 3 years.
What I saw was friend helping friend, neighbor helping neighbor, people in from all over the world. I mean, literally, I don't know how they got here so quick, but the entire world showed up to our doorstep. And that was very overwhelming in a lot of different ways, like overwhelming of, I think I finally understood what the magnitude of it was, but also overwhelming and how appreciative that we were of the people that were here to help.
When I walked into the office on that Monday morning early, the lights were blinking on the phone, and I picked it up, and it was a gentleman from Rockford, Illinois, a 92-year-old gentleman who said a message on there, said, "Mr. Watkins," I saw what happened down in Western Kentucky, and I knew that you ran the Community Foundation down there, and he said, I put 2 checks in FedEx today to get to you to help out down there. One is for $10,000 and the other one's for $100,000. And I want you to use it where it's needed most down there in the Mayfield, Graves County, Marshall County area. And when Chris walked in a few minutes later, I thought, man, we better buckle up, because this is going to be a wild ride. And I said it sarcastically, but it turned out to be true.
Community foundations in general have a good reputation of knowing the community's needs and helping donors to meet those needs with their dollars.
We had the fire departments rolling in from 2 or 3 counties over, and a lot of the major search and rescue teams went on to Mayfield with the candle factory and stuff like that. But we had a good group that came in, set up with us, and we started, getting with it as quick as we could.
Fortunately, our building didn't have any damage, so we were very lucky and blessed that we could continue operating. But we had, employees that were displaced, didn't have a home, and we provided some housing for some of those employees. We luckily had an apartment that we had, and we were able to offer that to our employees. And then also there were other therapists in Mayfield that completely got displaced. They didn't have a place to do work out of, so we offered our business to them, gave them a couple offices so they could continue seeing their clients. But yeah, as our company we're a team of helpers, but our helpers needed help as well through this tragedy. And we saw the grief. We saw that everybody was impacted in some way, a family member, a friend, or whatnot. And so we were glad to be there for the community, be there for our employees, and help other therapists that needed to keep helping people as well.
Humbling. Never been asked that. Humbling.
Just be grateful for what you have. Even though the roof leaks, Hope to stay warm this winter, because you don't have too much longer. And there's people that need it more than you do, and just accept that this is the way it's going to be. This is the way your life is going to be. The problem with that, there goes the dream, there goes the hope. And you think, well, maybe death will come sooner than later.
Sure.
Because I don't want to be a burden on people. I don't want to be poor, pitiful me. And people look at me with poor, pitiful me. So I thought, I'll just be like a caterpillar in a cocoon, and I'll never be a butterfly again. And that's okay. That's okay. But it's not okay, because parts of you becomes the self-doubt and the pride and the dignity, and not socializing with people will just destroy you. And fear is the mind killer, and that's what would happen. Well, maybe I will freeze to death. Maybe this, maybe that. You know, I'm scared to drive. And it's kind of emotional torture, honey. It really is.
We weren't equipped for this. We knew it early on. I mean, we didn't try to kid anybody, but we did look around and think, okay, who is going to lead this effort? And we actually thought there would be some other, regional nonprofit step up and take the lead in this, but it quickly became very apparent that that was not going to happen. And when we sat down and logically looked at it, we were the only organization that actually had services from Fulton to Henderson in this geographical area. The only nonprofit that had services and worked with these people, that had our finger on the pulse of what's going on. And we were the only one that logically could lead the services in this.
I think it was around December 16th that we had received a phone call from a donor on the East Coast. And this man was just passionate about getting 1,000 bicycles to children who had been impacted by the tornado before Christmas. And he called the Community Foundation. Community Foundation being local and having the nonprofit network and knowing where the needs are and where the people are working, we were able to purchase the bicycles, assemble the bicycles, and distribute the bicycles over 100 miles. And it ended up being 1,200 bicycles that were given to children before Christmas, and we did that in 5 days, with 3 of those days being no activity due to waiting for the payment to come in. And so that's the power of the nonprofit network at the Community Foundation, when we know the needs and we know who are serving the needs. And then when you put that donor dollar behind it, things like that can happen quickly.
It's nice to know that during a disaster, all the egos get set to the side. There's not a paid firefighter, there's not a volunteer firefighter. We're all first responders.
As we've gone through the process, or are going through the process of the recovery, people are always coming out to help, even the ones that lost their own home, even, working with the kids. We have volunteers who are giving up their time, teachers who should be preparing their classroom for school to start, who are taking time out to come in and love on the kids and teach them to cope with trauma. So I just think it's the community watching out for each other.
Not only did we have to, we started working with FEMA, we had all these federal agencies coming in. We knew we had to have policies and procedures in place, that we had to help individuals.
I had already started helping write all the policies and procedures for all of the committees that make up the organization, because you just don't realize how much goes into standing up a long-term recovery group when you don't live in a natural disaster. Like, every area ought to have all that stuff in place already, so if something were to hit. Because that took us months to try to figure out those processes and procedures and policies, and we're still having to refine those a year and a half later. Our case management is going to help them get holistically recovered and on the other side, hopefully in a better situation than they were even prior to the tornado.
Everybody in the county knew that Dawson Springs and Barnsley was heavily affected, so everyone in the Madisonville local government, the county government, everybody stepped up. They found the warehousing. Red Cross came in, helped set everything up, County magistrates volunteered to work the donation center to organize the stuff, inventory it, hand it out. It's really a community effort.
The local people are going to be here when the outside agencies go home. So we need to be here to establish those relationships. They're our friends, they're our family. We know extended family of the people we're working with, and I think that bonds, it just makes a better bond, and so there's more trust.
Because of the tornado, we have been able to compile all these resources, and even if it's not, like I said, a tornado-related need, if there was a blue sky service out there in the community that people didn't know about, we're able to even connect them with that. So, I think that's very helpful.
It's not just a rebuilding of buildings, it's rebuilding of lives. And that's where the healing has to occur.
My husband of almost 45 years, Vietnam veteran, had to be displaced and put in a veterans facility. And that loss also I've had to try to navigate through. They say what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I hope that's right. I hope that's right. I'm just a little lady, and I've got to be stronger. But it's difficult at my age, under the circumstances. You can't live without a dream. And when there's not much future, it's hard to have dreams. The week before, well, I'm not sure it was a week, but I was at the lowest place in my life. And I prayed, and I said, maybe it's time. Maybe it's time for me to head for home. Maybe this is not meant to be my home anymore. And my phone rang, and it was Sally Moore. And the dream came, and the hope came. And I'm here to fight another day. And my little house, everywhere I look, it goes, thank you, thank you. And it means I don't know how limited my future is. But at least I want to live for a future. And I want to live it in this tiny little house.
Since this has happened, I've seen the absolute best in humanity, the absolute best in people. And that has blown me away. I've never experienced anything like that. Obviously, no one in the community has. But to have people just show up and say, we're here to help. Or not even that. They see a tree in the road. They just get their chainsaw out and just start cutting trees like.
I don't know if I have enough adverbs. I don't know if I have the words in my vocabulary to express to you what has happened to me in this beautiful week. Like I said, Sally called me, and I had only met her one time before, and I verbalized to her what I've just said to you. And I said, really, I think there's people that need this more than me. And she said, Pam, you need this. And she said, I have some gentlemen coming from Louisville. I don't know if I said that right. And when they drove up, I knew superheroes. And that's what I said, superheroes. No, super duper scooper heroes.
It amazed me that night how many people showed up at the church because they were interested parties in what recovery was going to look like. And I think that is crucial to recovery.
The minute they got here, it was like, get her done. But what they brought into my life and this sweet little house was encouragement, inspiration, spiritual enlightenment, humanitarian, wonderful, good, accomplished men who took time out of their life to help a poor wretch like me with all the respect and dignity, encouragement and love. I've got a dream and a hope.
Anybody that was here the day after the tornado, to see even the people who came into the community that from all over the United States, like, you have no, when you see natural disasters on television, you don't really know what's happening there. And I mean, it's impressive how much people cared about our community to come here.
If they had just come and visited, it would have given me hope. But what they did, and winter was coming, and the water was coming in my house. What they have done, you can't buy it. I couldn't have bought it. I couldn't have afforded it. But to give of themselves as freely as they did, and to encourage me and make me feel like there is quality of life and there is hope for me to live another day. That there are people that even if you're old and you're sick, they still love and respect you, and they're going to make your life as secure as they possibly can.
The Community Foundation continues its mission, building homes across the 16 affected counties, ensuring that those displaced by the tornado still have a place to call home.
We want to do temporary housing. We knew that was first and foremost on our list, because we went up to a couple of towns and saw they were devastated and people are still underneath tarps. So we wanted to do that. We wanted to do permanent housing because you can only stay in temporary housing for so long, and then counseling. Those are the first three things that we wanted to do.
We have a program called New Lease on Life where we're putting renters into blighted homes that we're purchasing, and then completely remodeling them and bringing them up to better standards with hurricane straps and reinforced windows and all these other things. But so when we move a family into those, we have a home dedication and celebrate that with the family. And I think that that's good for both the staff and the community to see that recovery that's happening in the community.
Well, without further ado, Miss Sherry, take your blindfold off and turn around and see your brand new home. Yeah, come on.
It's extremely exciting. I'm humbled, to say the least, that all these people would volunteer their time and work out in 100-degree weather for someone like me to give me a beautiful home.
It's one thing to have money coming in. It's something else to start dispersing that money, and dispersing it where there's transparency and wisely, and where it has the most effect to it.
Partners who have made donations towards those homes, whether monetary or physical labor, try to come to the celebration too to be a part of it. We fully furnish that house for the survivors so that they don't have to worry about that. And then we have welcome home baskets for them in their home. It's exciting to see that they're finally being recovered, and it's also exciting to see how terrible some of these houses are, really terrible when we start on them, and how great they look at the end.
We had heard from our partners over in East Kentucky that they had been using container homes over there, and FEMA was still at least 6 weeks out from bringing FEMA trailers in. So you had a little space, a gap in there that something had to be done. So we hooked up with the guys that had provided the container homes, which are the big containers that you see on the ships out in the ocean that have been fabricated with sheetrock and air conditioners and tankless water heaters and flat screen TVs, and made to be a living component inside those container homes. And they're very fitting.
I think it helps keep that hope for those that are still awaiting case management to see those home dedications. They're so thankful and so happy that we're helping them. It reminds me of why I'm here.
It was really hard in those early days to just get going. We're starting everything from scratch, and we're trying to find property, and Even the properties that had been cleaned off were still in a pretty rough state. And so getting through property acquisitions and title opinions, and I mean, there's just a lot of stuff to do to build a house. We're 20 months out from the tornado, and the last 12 months, 14 months, really the future's been pretty easy to see. We had to build a lot of houses. We had to get folks back in as many houses as possible. I think we're beginning to enter a phase of recovery that might be a little more ambiguous. I feel like we're kind of in phase 3, and that's the last phase. And this may get a little more tricky, trying to figure out what are the lingering needs of families. What does that look like? We know here in Dawson Springs, one of the needs will be affordable rental because the incomes are low. Home ownership, even free houses, aren't the ideal situation for a lot of these families. And we lost 2 large rental properties here, apartment complexes. And so how do we get some of those families back into housing? And it looks like a lot of the survivors will have found help by the time we get there. We're going to be somewhere in the mid to upper 30 houses, and we're proud of that. I mean, we have really worked hard to make this happen, and that first one was difficult. The second one maybe was a little more difficult, but then the third one got a little easier, and they all have gotten a little bit easier since then. I drove by, we have 3 houses in a row on a street here in Dawson Springs that we just sold last week. Moved the families in, and the families I could see the empty cardboard boxes on the front porch, and one of them had a van backed up to the back door. They're still moving in and getting set up, and that's pretty cool, right? I mean, that 20 months ago a tornado ripped through there and destroyed the houses and displaced the families, and now you see cars parked in the driveway and empty cardboard boxes on the front porch, and it just, that means something.
Recovery is never easy. Years have passed since the EF4 tornado tore through this heart of the region, yet many survivors remain in need. The Community Foundation is committed to standing by them, rebuilding homes, restoring hope, and helping the community find its way back to a new normal.
Now we've even taken the steps, or Chris has led the effort to start this Center for Resiliency for the next disaster down the road, that we're partnering with some other agencies here in Western Kentucky to build this center that we can train people in these different counties for when the next disaster does happen, we're better equipped to address it. So we don't have to start from scratch all over again, that we've got these models that we can follow and these protocols that we can follow.
We're talking the next few years, there are going to be more people home, and there are going to be more resolution and more recovery plans complete. And, life is going to look different for a lot of people. Life's going to look different for our region.
The community as a whole are very sensitive to weather situations that before we just went along our daily lives, went on to work, and now it's, do we need to close? Do we need to be able to shelter in place? So even for something that's minor or routine, it definitely is impact how that's seen, and just the fear from that.
I'll never watch Twister again as long as I live. Ever. And I can remember when I was a little girl and these summer storms would come up, and I thought they were just wonderful. And my grandma would say, "They're not. Get in the house. This could be trouble." And nobody telling you that it was going to be trouble, At least we had a little bit of a heads up, but I have never felt more helpless in all my life.
I'd say that we need to learn from history. We saw in 1925 a tornado that we knew. Among meteorologists, we talk daily about a little bit of everything. Occasionally subjects come up like super outbreaks of tornado. The Ohio Valley, Tennessee Valley, our region in particular, is overdue for a super outbreak of tornadoes. We saw it in the 1970s, we've seen some in the last decade, but they've missed our local area. It will happen one day. We will have a day where we have multiple EF4, EF5 tornadoes move across our region. Our fuel for thunderstorms, for winter storms, comes from the Gulf of Mexico.
Common sense goes a long way in something like this. You don't have to go out and recreate the wheel. Chris and some of her group started planting the seeds for long-term plans for when this disaster is over with. What about the next one? As you know, we live on the New Madrid Fault. There's going to be a next one. And it might be the last one we ever have to work on, but there's going to be a next one. And so we thought the best thing we could do is take what we have learned and put that into some sort of a plan, a large plan, so other people could follow, maybe a software package of some sort to share with our neighbors, because that's one of the things that I've seen through this whole thing. We're no longer just neighbors. We're family now. Not friends, we're family. I mean, we've all suffered trauma through this together. We all kind of feel some pain that we've gone through all this together. And I think it's a natural process to share things with people that you care about and you are concerned about and you want to help.
It's hard to go through the recovery part in and of itself, but we realized very quickly that one of the most important things that we could do besides helping with the recovery was to listen, right? So we listened to the citizens, and we listened to the local officials, and we listened to the citizen leaders who stood up to lead recovery, and we listened to the nonprofits that came into our communities to serve. And so we took all that information and compiled it into what we call our lessons learned file to kind of develop a plan as to how can we better prepare our communities for the next disaster. And one thing that we realized is that we were lacking the infrastructure needed for an influx of resources. We were lacking the infrastructure to identify a mass amount of needs for individuals. And so, like Tony was mentioning, we created a preparedness program, and that's called DARCY. DARCY stands for Disaster Aware and Ready Communities. And with it, it's just those basic things that we learned kind of step by step, taking all of that ground level information into consideration as to how we can better prepare our communities. And what we come to realize is that they need to be prepared and they need to be connected. And we needed the tool to be able to identify those needs, account for the assistance that's come in, and kind of tell our recovery story to track our progress.
I've chased storms since that night, but it's not like I've lost my will to chase, but it's just, I'm flat on it, you know. It's not that it's not fun anymore, but it just changed my perspective as a storm chaser. Do I want to go do that again? Maybe it's because I have more empathy for people. I don't know. It's just really hard to put into words. It's not as fun as it used to be.
I guess where we began, we really didn't know. We didn't have a vision. We didn't have an understanding of what long-term recovery was. So we were gaining that knowledge and the skills as we were going through it. So I'm really proud to say that 12 long-term recovery groups, they have, we can account for over $40 million worth of resources.
Oh, don't give up. Please don't give up. Please don't give up. Don't get this. I know it's so hard.
The faces of this region and their determination to survive truly embodies the American spirit. It's a symbol that no matter what we face as Americans, we will always find a way forward. And while rebuilding may take many more years to come, emotions are still raw for those that lived through that horrible night. Life is starting to become a little more normal with each day, and tears have started to turn into hope, dreams beginning to take bloom and hold again. And the sweet spirit of what makes this area of the world so special can once again start to be seen on the faces of the people in the towns impacted by that storm. What took place on that horrible night claimed so many lives and wounded hundreds more. That'll never be forgotten. But there's still much more work that needs to be done. But at least there's a little solace in knowing that the healing has begun. I'm Corey Deerdorf, and from all of us that had part in making this documentary for you to watch, thank you for listening to our story.